In 1 hour, I am supposed to marry the love of my life. There's just one problem. Perhaps two. 3 years ago, I was deeply, publicly in a relationship with his son, and I just found a letter that could very well ruin this wedding. It was tucked inside a book of poetry on his bedside table. It's not a prenuptial agreement or a love letter. It's a note from his late wife. And the 3 sentences written on it have unraveled the entire beautiful, painful tapestry of our relationship. And the 3 sentences written on it have unraveled the entire beautiful, painful tapestry of our relationship. To understand why my hand is shaking too much to put on my earrings, you need to understand how I fell into this impossible situation in the first place. This isn't a story about an affair. This is a story about echoes. Let me give you a background so you understand my story and remind you to subscribe if you like interesting stories like this. My life before the Kang family was a canvas of quiet grays. I am Sumin, the art restorer, the daughter of a humble schoolteacher. My world was one of muted colors and delicate brushstrokes, of preserving beauty that belonged to other, wealthier people. Then I met Jae-hoon Kang at a charity auction for the Seoul Arts Center. He was a splash of vivid, primary color in my monochrome existence. Young, handsome, a prosecutor with a jawline that could cut glass, and a family name that opened doors. He pursued me with a focused intensity that was both flattering and overwhelming. Our dates were at Michelin-starred restaurants. His gifts were expensive and tasteful. My mother, a practical woman who had struggled her whole life, was overjoyed. "You've caught a big one, Sumina," she'd whisper, half in awe, half in warning. "Don't let him get away." But from the beginning, there was a dissonance. Jae-hoon loved the idea of me, the beautiful, artistic girlfriend who complemented his successful image. He'd introduce me to his colleagues. "This is Sumin, she works with art." But he never asked what I was working on. He'd hang my paintings on his wall but never really look at them. Our conversations were like 2 different radio stations playing at once. He talked about case law and political connections. I talked about pigments and the emotional weight of light. We were a beautiful picture, but the frame was all wrong. The first time I met his father, Min-jun Kang, was at the family's Gangnam penthouse. I was nervous, dressed in a stiff, new dress Jae-hoon had picked out. Min-jun Kang was not what I expected. Where Jae-hoon was sharp angles and loud confidence, his father was a study in quiet lines and profound stillness. He was an architect, a man who had shaped the Seoul skyline, yet he carried himself with a gentle humility. The apartment was a masterpiece of his design, minimalist, but warm, filled with light and hidden details that revealed themselves slowly. That first meeting, while Jae-hoon took a business call, his father didn't ask me about my family or my education. He stood before a small, abstract painting I had given Jae-hoon as a housewarming gift. "This is yours?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I nodded, bracing for a polite, disinterested compliment. "You use color not as decoration, but as architecture," he said, his eyes never leaving the canvas. "The blue here, it's not sadness. It's the structural support for the joy in the yellow. It's the load-bearing wall of the emotion." I was speechless. In 1 sentence, he had seen more of me than Jae-hoon had in 6 months. The affair didn't begin with a passionate declaration or a stolen kiss. It began with a series of quiet, seismic understandings. It was the way he'd hand me a cup of tea, knowing exactly how I took it without ever being told. It was the books he'd lend me, a volume of Rilke poetry, a text on Japanese joinery, each one feeling like a key to a part of my own mind I hadn't yet unlocked. We began talking on the phone, late at night, after Jae-hoon had fallen asleep. We talked about everything: the grief of losing his wife, the pressure Jae-hoon felt to live up to the family name, my own fears of being a perpetual outsider in their world. The physical turning point came after my father's sudden death from a heart attack. My world collapsed. Jae-hoon, embroiled in a high-profile case, sent flowers and a text. "So sorry. Let me know about the funeral arrangements." He was absent, emotionally and physically. Min-jun, however, was there. He drove to my mother's house in the countryside, arranged the funeral details with a quiet efficiency that lifted the burden from our shoulders, and stood by my side throughout the service. His presence was an anchor in my storm of grief. Week later, back in Seoul and drowning in silence, I found myself outside his office. It was past midnight, but the light was on. He was at his drafting table, surrounded by a new skyscraper's skeleton. He didn't seem surprised to see me. We didn't speak. He simply opened his arms and I walked into them. I cried for what felt like hours, and he just held me, his hand gently stroking my hair. When I finally looked up, his face was wet with tears, too. The first kiss was inevitable. It was not a kiss of illicit passion, but of profound, heartbreaking recognition. It felt less like beginning something new and more like coming home. The guilt was a living thing, coiling in my stomach. I tried to end it to recommit to Jae-hoon. I suggested couples therapy. He laughed it off. I tried to share my grief. He told me to be strong. The distance between Jae-hoon and me was a chasm, and my connection with his father was the only bridge across it. The day Jae-hoon found my sketchbook was almost a relief. The explosion was nuclear. The accusations, the shattered vase, the way he looked at his father, not just with anger, but with a deep, old wound being torn open. I realized then that their rift was older than me. I was just the spark that lit the tinder. In the aftermath, I became a social pariah. The story was too juicy to contain. Architect's son cuckolded by his own father. I lost friends. My mother couldn't look me in the eye. The art gallery where I worked part-time let me go, citing shifting priorities. I was adrift, burdened by a love that felt more like a crime. I moved to Busan, to a tiny, damp studio apartment overlooking the harbor. The air smelled of salt and fish, a world away from the perfumed halls of Gangnam. I got a job as a barista, the mindless routine a welcome anesthetic. For 6 months, I heard nothing from Minjun. I assumed he had chosen his son, his reputation, his old life. The pain was a constant, dull ache. Then one Tuesday, he was there, standing in the coffee shop, looking entirely out of place in his elegant coat, yet completely calm. He didn't beg or declare his love. He placed a folder on the counter. "I bought a hanok in Bukshan," he said. "It's 150 years old and it's dying. I want to restore it not as a museum but as a living art space. A place for artists like you. I need your eyes, Sumin. I can't do it without you." It was a lifeline, professionally and emotionally. But it was also a test. Could we be in the same room without the world collapsing? The restoration of the hanok became our shared language. We communicated through floor plans and material samples, through the discovery of an original stained glass window hidden behind plaster, through the debate of preserving a crack in the wood that told a story. We were professional, respectful, but the electricity was still there, humming beneath the surface of every conversation. We were rebuilding this house, and in doing so, we were slowly, carefully rebuilding us. One evening, after a long day of supervising the carpenters, we sat on the dusty floor of the main hall, sharing a container of tteokbokki. The setting sun streamed through the newly restored lattice windows, painting the room in stripes of gold. "He's getting married," Minjun said quietly, not looking at me. I froze, a piece of rice cake halfway to my mouth. Jae-hoon. A colleague's daughter. The announcement was in the paper today. The news was a physical blow. It was the final closing of a door I hadn't realized I was still holding open. Minjun watched my face, reading the pain there. "He's doing what's expected, what I did at his age." He sighed, a sound of immense weariness. "I am 54 years old, Sumin. I have spent my life building structures that will outlive me. I have followed every rule, upheld every tradition except for one. And that one exception, you, is the only thing that has ever made me feel truly alive." He didn't get down on one knee. He simply took my hand, his own rough from months of work on the house. "My son will never forgive me. My sisters have disowned me. The papers will call me a fool. But I cannot imagine the rest of my life without you in it. It would be a beautifully constructed, utterly empty building. Marry me." I said yes. Not for the money or the security, but because in that dusty, half-rebuilt hanok, I saw a future I had built with my own hands. A future of shared purpose and deep understanding. The wedding planning was a solitary affair. We had no family to invite. We decided on a small, simple ceremony at the now-finished hanok. I designed my own non-traditional outfit. He designed our wedding rings, embedding a sliver of wood salvaged from the original hanok frame into the platinum. We were creating our own traditions, our own family, from the ruins of the old. The day before the wedding, a sense of profound peace settled over me. I was sure I was making the right choice. Then, on the morning of the wedding, I went to Min Jun's study in the Hanok to find a specific pen to sign the registry. On his bedside table was a worn copy of Kim Haisoon's poetry. I flipped it open, and a single, crisply folded note fell out. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and unfamiliar. It was not a long note, just 3 sentences. Min Jun, I see the way you look at her. She has my sister's eyes. Don't make the same mistake twice. It was signed with a single initial. Why? His wife's name was Yuna. The floor dropped out from under me. She has my sister's eyes. The Aunt Jae-hoon had mentioned in his outburst. It wasn't just one affair. It was a pattern, a sickness. And I wasn't the unique soulmate he saw. I was a replacement, a mirror of another woman he couldn't have. The beautiful, unique connection I thought we had was just an echo of an older, more complicated story. The Hanok, our sanctuary, suddenly felt like a beautifully decorated cage. The wedding march began to play. It was a string quartet we had hired, the music floating through the Hanok's courtyard. I stood at the end of the stone path, my arm linked with the manager of the art space, a kind, elderly man who had agreed to stand in for my absent father. Min Jun waited under the wooden pavilion he had designed himself. He looked handsome and, for the first time since I'd known him, genuinely happy. The few guests, a handful of his most loyal employees, a few of my artist friends, smiled encouragingly. But all I could see was the note, the words burning behind my eyes. She has my sister's eyes. Was that why he was drawn to me in that first gallery? Not because of my art, but because of a fleeting, familial resemblance I didn't even possess. I walked down the path, each step feeling like I was wading through cement. My smile was a rigid mask. When I reached Min Jun, he took my hands. His were warm, steady. Mine were ice cold. You look like a vision I once had but never thought I'd see, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The officiant began the ceremony. The words were a blur. I was supposed to be reciting vows I had written myself, vows about building a life from a foundation of truth. The hypocrisy was choking me. The officiant reached the pivotal moment. If anyone here present can show just and legal cause why these two may not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. I expected the silence. I willed myself to breathe through it, to push the doubt away. But then the main gate of the Hanok creaked open. Jae-hoon stood there, not in a rage but looking utterly broken. He was thinner, his face gaunt. He wasn't here to object, but what he said next almost destroyed me. "Father," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet courtyard. It wasn't loud, but it was devastating. "Please, stop this. Tell her the truth, not the version you tell yourself. The real truth about Mother, about Auntie Surai." The blood drained from Min Jun's face. The happy facade crumbled, revealing the weary, guilty man beneath. The guests were frozen, a tableau of shock. Min Jun's grip on my hands tightened, as if I were a lifeline. "Jae-hoon, not here, not now." "Then when?" Jae-hoon's voice broke. "When she's pregnant, when she finds out she's just living in a house of mirrors. Tell her why you really brought her here. Tell her why this Hanok was so important to restore." The reception was canceled before it began. The guests were ushered out with awkward apologies. The 3 of us were left in the main hall of the Hanok, surrounded by the ghosts of Min Jun's past. The beautiful space I had helped restore now felt like a courtroom. And there, amidst the sawdust and the scent of fresh tatami, the full, unvarnished truth came out. Min Jun's affair hadn't been with a stranger. It had been with his wife Yuna's younger sister, Surai. It had been a brief, intense entanglement during a period when Yuna was deeply depressed after a miscarriage. Jae-hoon, then just 16, had come home early from school and found them in this very Hanok, which had been Yuna's family home. "He begged me not to tell Mother," Jae-hoon said, staring at his father with a lifetime of hurt in his eyes. "He said it was a mistake, that it would kill her, so I carried his secret. I watched Mother love you, trust you, while you were in love with her sister. And then she got sick, and she died, and I had to live with the fact that I never gave her the truth." Minjun was crying, silent tears streaming down his face. I never loved Surai. It was a moment of weakness, of stupidity, but your mother. She must have suspected. She became distant. This note. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I found it after she died. It destroyed me when I met you, Sumin. It wasn't because you looked like her. It was because you were the opposite. You were honest. You were real, restoring this house with you. It was my penance. It was my attempt to build something beautiful and true, where I had once created something ugly and false. The pieces finally clicked into place. His intense, almost desperate love for me, his need to create a new world away from the old one. I wasn't a replacement for his wife. I was a replacement for his own guilt, a chance at redemption. I looked from the broken father to the wounded son. I saw the decades of silence and pain that stretched between them, and I realized my place in this family drama. I was the catalyst, not the cause. I was the new element that had forced the poison to the surface, but the infection had been there long before I arrived. I stood up. I took off the beautiful, custom-designed ring and placed it gently on the low table between us. I love you, Minjun, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. But you don't need a wife, you need a priest. And you too. I looked at both of them. You don't need me in the middle. You need to learn how to talk to each other. I walked out of the hanok, leaving them alone with their decades of unspoken words. The wedding was over. My relationship with Minjun was over. But as I stepped out into the sole afternoon, I didn't feel the crushing grief I expected. I felt a strange, profound clarity. I had been living in a story I didn't fully understand, a story that belonged to someone else. Now, for the first time, I was free to write my own story. Dear friend, if this story resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about the difficult path to finding your own truth.